Hello and welcome to Trusts and Estates Weekly. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're here every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time to talk about matters relating to estate planning and the administration of probates and trusts, both from the standpoint of doing your own financial planning or being a professional who helps people with that task. So today I'm going to talk about a subject that I think is a well. I realize this is no pun was intended here. A little bit off the beaten path, so to speak. So the phenomenon of digital nomads has grown, especially since the COVID time, and so for people who um, on a regular basis are switching the location where they're working, either within the United States or these days, really, you can be, throughout the world. Um, that really complicates estate planning. And so I put together a little presentation just because, um, oops, there we go. Just because there's a number of um, special issues that need to be dealt with over and above those for just a regular estate plan. So we've talked about many of the issues that relate to estate planning really for anybody. Today, I'm going to focus on just those that apply to people who live and work in a variety of locations and how that impacts what they do. So, as is the case, um, everything we do on the Way to Wow show revolves around the three pillars of attainment. And you can see it there over my shoulder now. You might have noticed I switched my office around a little bit, and it makes my home more livable, I think. But in any event, you can see here on the screen, generally speaking, we're dealing in the finances realm of the pursuits pillar, um, uh, especially though when we're talking about trusts and estates. So relationships play a big part in it, both family and friends. So let's look at some of these issues now. Okay, so these are special concerns when you're a digital nomad or when you're, living in multiple jurisdictions. Okay, so the first thing is what I just mentioned, jurisdictions. So it's laws that govern probate and estates and trusts are all on here in the United States on a state by state basis. While there is a federal gift tax exemption and a state, I should say, gift and estate tax exemption in terms of when someone who dies has to pay taxes. Um, the vast majority of issues related to estates are controlled by the individual 50 United States. By the way, that's also true of most issues that impact real estate. And since real estate is oftentimes the biggest assets in an estate, so those are individual jurisdiction issues as well. And then if you go outside the United States, it becomes a country by country issue. So um, in Mexico, for example, so I've been helping a friend who's I believe it's his great uncle passed away. He lived in Mexico, and he's trying to figure out some estate issues. So laws in Mexico are not the same necessarily as they are here in the United States. So one of the things that's different is it's much harder to do asset searches in Mexico than it is here. Okay, and I haven't quite figured out yet if the laws vary in the different between the different states in Mexico, Durango versus I don't know the name of another. Baja California, maybe, is that a separate state? I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know Mexico well enough. I happen to know Durango because that's where my friend's great uncle's property is. So so but the issues there are different than the issues, or the processes there are different than the processes here. I mean, they're not wildly different necessarily, especially between Mexico and California, with both which both have Spanish law as their bases, but they are different enough that it would be imprudent to assume that the way you've done things in, say, Georgia, that's the same way they're done in Mexico. Okay, so and then going on from there into European countries, etc. Each has its own laws, and especially when it comes to taxation. So if you're dealing with multiple venues, as you can see there under jurisdiction tax implications. So each jurisdiction may be entitled to, its share of the pot of money, or at least its share of the part of the pot of money that is within its jurisdiction, right? And these laws can be very complex. So some jurisdictions may seek to tax property even outside of their jurisdiction if the person, for example, was a citizen of their country, or a legal resident or something like that. All of this gets very, very complicated. Okay, and so we'll talk about this a little bit later, but making sure that you understand the various laws to which you're subject is crucial in doing an estate plan for digital nomads. The average person will not necessarily be up to date on all of these issues, so it takes a specialist. So I know for me, I have a colleague. He actually lives on the Isle of Man, and his specialty is international estate concerns. And so when these kind of things come up, I mean, I get on the phone, or, well, I get on Zoom or email to him to make sure that all of these various issues are being addressed correctly. Okay, now another jurisdictional issue to keep in mind is healthcare and medical directives. So some locations have different allow different things than others. So, for example, Oregon allows assisted suicide, whereas I believe Texas, for example, does not. Okay, so in your healthcare directive, if you're moving between different states, so while maybe you prepared your healthcare directives when you were living in Oregon and now you're living in Texas, um, because Texas law doesn't provide for assisted suicide. So it's very possible that that law will override your healthcare directive. In any event, it would cause the healthcare professionals who are caring for you to seek legal clarification before they complied with your healthcare directive, to make sure that they weren't doing something for which they could be liable civilly or criminally in the case of assisted suicide. So again, these things need to be checked out. And the rules, the regulations, the laws in various jurisdictions need to be understood. Now, next, and this is sort of a jurisdictional issue, although not necessarily, it depends on the jurisdiction, and that is asset location. So, depending on where assets are, that may impact which law um, uh, governs in terms of the disposition of that asset under your estate plan. Okay, so let's take an example where you live in, pick a state at random, Ohio, okay, but you own, let's say, a small retail property in Colorado, in Denver, okay? So the question arises, will a trust drawn up in Ohio govern for a property that's located in Colorado? Okay. Now, um, you're talking two different jurisdictions, okay? And depending on what the laws are in those jurisdictions, the answer may be yes, no, or maybe, right? And so, again, you'll need to get you'll need to be clear on what those rules are, to make sure that things are handled in accordance with your wishes. So it may be the issue could be, and I'm not giving legal advice, of course, I never do, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that having a trust that was set up in Ohio, because of the way the law in Colorado is, doesn't control for a Colorado based piece of property, right? So then the trust may need to have a provision in it that says, the property, such and such property will be governed with respect to the laws of Colorado, and there's and then there'll be a special section of the trust to deal with that particular asset. Okay, so again, these are things that you want to check out in advance and not just leave them to happenstance. And the one of the main reasons for checking them out in advance is, if you leave them to happenstance, minimally that makes it more expensive to settle your estate or to settle your trust. Okay, because anytime these questions arise, so that means legal fees, it may mean needing to file something with the court. Okay, especially if there's multiple heirs, and depending on to which heir a particular asset is going, if that's the way it was set up. So then you want to make sure that things are very, very clear in how they're going to happen, to minimize the opportunity for heirs to challenge how the estate is being administrated, and again, to keep the settlement costs down, and also just to reduce the chances of disputes between the heirs, which never seem to work out well. Okay, next, digital assets. So oftentimes people who move around a lot, working in different locations, they may not have a lot or any real estate, but they will typically have digital assets. Now, that could be anything from cryptocurrencies and those kind of things. What are they called? Fungible or token something, FTBs or something. I forget what they are. Anyway, different types of digital assets, and they also may have financial accounts that basically they deal with digitally as well. So then, does it matter where the particular brokerage or financial service firm is domiciled relative to where you are living, or if you're a professional, where your client is living? So again, these issues need to be taken into account. Make sure that they're understood. And the other thing about digital assets, and this applies to them really whether you're a digital nomad or not, is because of the way things like crypto wallets work and such, without passwords and other online access codes, those assets may be completely inaccessible to your successor trustee, to the administrator of your estate. And so, while obviously you want to keep that information secure, in somewhere those access codes, those passwords need to exist, so that those assets can be accessed at the time your estate needs to be settled. Okay, otherwise, again, they're just lost. I I don't think, and this is just my opinion, I don't think the whole crypto industry has really grappled with this issue very much because the whole asset class is so new. There probably haven't been a lot of people dying and heirs clamoring to get a hold of those digital assets if they even knew that they existed. But over time, as more and more people acquire digital assets and then pass away, and it becomes a more common type of asset for heirs to deal with, or for successor trustees and administrators to deal with. So I think um, something is going to have to develop in order for the blockchain, which is the technology that essentially stores digital assets, in order for the blockchain to be accessible in these types of circumstances. Um, okay, next, business succession. So if you are a digital nomad and you have your own business, which you very commonly, that is the case. Okay, so what's going to happen to that business when you die, right? First, where is the business domiciled? When I use the word domiciled, I mean where, like for example, was it formed here in California? Is it a California LLC? Is it a corporation? Or was it formed in a foreign country? So where is it domiciled, and how does that impact the ability for the business to continue operating if that is your wish? On the other hand, what does it mean to have to have the business owner die? So I'll give you an example that I'm dealing with, and that is a single member LLC. An LLC is a limited liability company. Okay, so um, an LLC should have an operating agreement, especially when there's multiple members. But it's not uncommon when an LLC has a single member, since that person gets to decide whatever he wants to. So he won't go to the trouble or expense of having an operating agreement drawn up. Okay, so then what happens when that single member of the LLC dies? Okay, so here in California, and again, like real estate, business entities are a state by state, jurisdiction by jurisdiction entity. So when here in California, when the sole member of an LLC dies, then by statute, in other words, by California law, this is in the Corporations Code, I believe, the person's estate succeeds to being the sole member of the LLC. Now, that is an exception to the general rule that if an LLC is memberless for 90 days or more, the LLC is defeated, meaning it ceases to exist. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. I can't tell you what the rules are in other jurisdictions. I haven't dealt with this issue in any other state. But here in California, that's essentially what it appears the law says. Of course, if you find yourself in this situation, you want to, clarify it with your legal counsel. Nonetheless, what would that mean then for the succession of your business? On the flip side, do you just want to have the business wrapped up at the time you die? And if so, fine. Okay, what is that going to mean, though, if you're not in the jurisdiction in which the business is domiciled? How is that wrapping up of the business going to take place? Okay, so again, that's all part and parcel of having a multi-jurisdictional life. Okay, next. There we go. All right. So some other special concerns with respect to being a digital nomad and dealing with your estate plan. So privacy and security. oftentimes, people who live this sort of nomadic life, one of the reasons they do that is because they feel like it enhances the privacy surrounding their life and their security. The flip side is that that very privacy and security can make it more difficult to deal with settling your estate or the person's estate when that person passes away. And so all of those issues need to be thought through to make sure that in creating the privacy protections and the security protections, they're not done so thoroughly that the estate is, in essence, permanently tied up. So I'm dealing with I've been talking to a prospective client recently where they have a situation that, due to some security concerns, an account that they're supposed to inherit, they can't get access to it. The brokerage that holds the account, there's some kind of security issue there. I don't know the exact nature of it. I was just told that that's what the issue was. And the one of the problems is there's not a whole lot of money in the account, so it doesn't make sense for the heirs to hire an attorney, for example, at $600, $700, $800 an hour to get this fixed, because 10 20 hours of that lawyer's time, and that would be a significant percentage of the assets in the account, evidently. And so they're looking for some kind of alternative. And unfortunately, it appears that the person who set up the account originally, they set it up in such a way as to make it very difficult for their heirs to deal with the security concerns after his death. And so now they're stuck in this kind of limbo. It's evidently been going on, or it's been in this situation for, as I understand it, maybe 2 or 3 years. So how frustrating is that for the heirs? Okay. And look, you can say, well, look, it's not their money, and if they never get it, no big deal. Well, I suppose so, but according to the estate documents, that is what the deceased wanted was for them to have these funds, but because of this security issue, they're not able to get it. So a difficult situation for everyone involved. And by the way, it would be easy to blame the brokerage and say, well, they should just let it go. But these days, regulations are so tough, are so complex. They're so tough. The penalties for not complying can be so high. I don't know that the brokerage can necessarily be blamed for being extremely cautious about how they handle things. There's so much fraud that goes on these days. So companies feel that they need to protect themselves. So it just becomes kind of a perfect storm in that respect. Okay, next is communication. So for someone who moves around quite often or periodically for professional reasons, staying in touch with various people related to their estate plan can be more difficult. They're probably not seeing them very often in person, if at all. And even while there's lots of ways to communicate these days, whether it's voice communication or Skype or Zoom or email or WhatsApp or whatever, all these different messaging apps. That's not. I guess a lot of people disagree with me on this, but I just don't think that that's as effective a way of communicating as face-to-face communication. So there is the challenge of being of sort of educating your family and beneficiaries as well as possible as to what you really want to happen with respect to your estate. Okay, as much as you can put written down in an estate plan, you're not going to be able to write every single thing down, number one. And number two, things will undoubtedly change from time to time, and to be constantly rewriting an estate plan can get pretty expensive. And so um, knowing, having your family and family members and or beneficiaries know your mind with respect to these things is very important in seeing that your wishes are carried out. And the same is true for an executor if you have a will, or a successor trustee or trustees if you have a trust. Okay, making sure that they understand what it is you really want to have happen, and ensuring that as much as possible they'll act in accordance with your wishes. That becomes more difficult if you're moving around a lot, and having these having creating the closeness of relationships that dealing with these issues well takes can be more difficult to accomplish. And so again, how are you going to set up those channels of communication? How frequently are you going to communicate with people? How are you going to build and maintain those relationships so that you, as much as possible, ensure that your wishes are carried out? Okay, next, plan maintenance. So, whereas for someone who is living and working and has all their assets in one jurisdiction, it may not be necessary for them to review their estate plan, very particularly frequently. Maybe only when there's a significant change in their life, or maybe only every 3 to 5 years, or something like that. We've talked about those in previous shows. For someone who is moving around for professional reasons frequently, so plan maintenance becomes an ongoing routine. And as well, even an anticipated move probably should trigger, if you will, the review of the person's estate plan, so that they understand, if I move to, I'm just pick a country at random, I move to Latvia, not a knock on Latvia, it's just the country that came to mind, but how will that affect my estate plan and the ability of my executor or my successor trustee to carry out my wishes? Right. And the answer may be, well, no, it's not going to have an impact. Okay, fine. And so there you go. But the other answer may be, well, it's going to impact you in this, and this way. And will that impact be significant enough that now your wishes can't be carried out, or it significantly reduces the chances that your wishes can be carried out? Will your estate be taxed at a much higher rate than it would have been had you not made that move? Those are all issues that should be investigated prior to making the move, because once you've made the move, now you're in a situation where those laws and regulations will apply whether you like them or not. Okay. And also then, are there any sort of follow-on? So having lived in that country at one time, does moving out simply sort of cancel its impact on your estate plan? And the answer may be yes, but the answer may be, well, no, because if you want to take assets out of that country, you may need to pay some sort of exit tax on them, something like that. Or if you let's say you bought a piece of real estate there, okay, what does it mean to leave that real estate behind, move to another country? What happens when you die? All of those should be figured out in advance before you make your next move. Okay, so then finally, what this really comes down to, and I mentioned this real briefly at the beginning of the show, is you're going to need sound professional assistance, and this is not going to be just any estate planner. Okay, this has to be someone who is familiar with dealing in multiple jurisdiction situations. Now, if you're staying within the United States but just moving from state to state, so there probably are more people who are familiar and can deal with a multi-state estate plan than there are people who can deal with a multi-country estate plan. And especially if you start getting into countries where the legal structure is not as robust or not as developed as it is here in the US, or England or whatever. Okay. So making sure that you have competent professional assistance will go a long, long way towards seeing to it that, number one, special concerns of being a digital nomad are properly addressed. And number two, that in the end, what your estate plan is about, which is seeing to it that your wishes after you die are carried out, are indeed, as well as possible, going to be carried out. Okay. And in the end, that's the point of an estate plan, right? Is to see to it that how you want things to happen once you pass away are most likely to happen. Okay. So you can see the complexities of being a digital nomad are really are substantial. Okay, so questions, comments, thoughts, feel free to drop them in our social media. You see the links here. They'll be in the show notes after the show posts. You can always reach out to me by email if you have a personal question. As I often say, I will answer it if it's within my scope of knowledge, but if it's a legal or accounting question, I'm neither a lawyer nor an accountant. So in most cases, I'm going to suggest that you contact one. And if you'd like, I'll be happy to make a referral to someone who can help you out. Okay. And then we have, the legal stuff to wrap things up. Spin, spin. There you go. And let's go ahead and shut this down. Okay, so I appreciate you joining me today. I always want to say this morning because here on the West Coast, it is still morning. But of course, on the East Coast, it's already afternoon. And actually, Central Time, it's already afternoon as well. But thanks very much for joining me. And just want to throw something out. If there's a topic that you're interested in and or that you are an expert in, and you want to be a guest here on Trust and Estates Weekly, just drop me a note, send me an email. That would be preferable. Would love to consider having you on the show. So tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time is Business Lessons from the Military. And we're going to be talking, last week we talked about how military training can be translated to the civilian world. We're going to be talking about that again from a different standpoint. And my topic is train like real life. And you'll see what I mean by that. So I invite you to join me. And then on Wednesday, my guest for People Making Money is Vanessa Donaldson. You may remember Vanessa from a few weeks ago. We had a fantastic conversation about this amazing life that she's had. And we didn't even get halfway through her life. So we decided we had to book a second show so that we can continue our talk. So I invite you to join us on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to hear the rest of Vanessa's story. And then a week from today at 10 a.m. next Monday will be the next episode of Trust and Estates Weekly. So thanks again for joining me, wishing you a wonderful rest of the day, and signing off as I always do. Marie, you are my bell. All the best, folks.